As the host of Neutralize the Mama Trauma podcast, I am delighted to be able to bring you this podcast. My name is Wendy Lopez, and I would like to introduce myself to you. I specialize in helping people overcome their emotional blocks through different techniques, through emotional empowerment coaching and compassionate healing light facilitation. As a mom who has experienced narcissistic trauma, I help moms eradicate self-doubt in order to regain self-confidence to elevate their status both at home and at work. In our podcast, we discuss people's struggles, triumphs, and failures. We dive deeper into self-love, self-compassion, self-acceptance, and mindful, holistic tips. In every episode, I hope that you can take a golden nugget of advice and apply it to the journey of motherhood in order to raise your level of awareness. Welcome to Neutralize the Mama Trauma podcast, where you find the healing and creative mental thought advice from experts on past pain, narcissistic experiences, and trauma. Today, we have a special guest, Angie Grandt. And she's an adoptive bio mom, former foster mom, speech therapist, and has worked in the autism field for 2+ decades. She knows that parents raising children can be difficult to connect with and often can display challenging behaviors that can take a huge toll on parents. This can often lead to shame, anxiety, depression, isolation, and a growing loss of hope. This does not have to be the story, and she's here to offer a solution. As a mindset coach, she helps parents show up as the parent they want to be, not as the reactive parent they've become. So I'm so excited to have you here, Angie, to share some wisdom, because I'm sure a lot of us can relate who's going to listen to this.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. And just grateful that we can hear from you. Like I was mentioning before we got on the podcast about how it's very important for me for moms to realize that wherever they see themselves right now, that is not the end be all, that there is more. The only thing that difference that you and I sitting here is we've worked through whatever it is you experienced, and I worked through whatever I've experienced. That could be a trauma, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and let you introduce yourself and how you got here.
Yeah. So thank you so much for having me here, Wendy. I appreciate it so much. So yeah, like you said, I am by profession, I am a speech pathologist. I've also worked in autism for a couple of decades now. And so, professionally, I've seen parents really struggle with, dealing with challenging behaviors, with, just the toll that it takes on them. And there's, there tends to be that secondary trauma where, they're becoming more and more reactive in the day-to-day experiences because they're just anticipating these big behaviors or the calls from school or even the, police involvement, whatever it might be. So about 12 years ago, I adopted my son. He was 5 at the time, and came to our family with quite a bit of trauma and attachment difficulties. But I thought, I'm totally equipped to do this because I've worked in the special needs field for so long. I know how to handle any kind of behaviors, right? It's easy when you go to work. And so I went into that parenting experience feeling totally ready, totally equipped. I had already taken some trainings, and I quickly realized how hard it was to keep my head in the game when his trauma was really impacting me and even pulling up old things from my past and, my paradigms about parenting and, how to show up and love him. The behaviors that were happening in my home kept just chipping away at my ability to really be the parent that I thought I was or that I wanted to be for him. And it, over the years, over the next decade or so, it just, it became so stressful to the point that I was losing sleep, my heart was racing, I was experiencing all of these things. as if I was the one who had experienced the trauma, but I was really just living in my home with my son who had, and being really impacted by his behaviors. And it was really creating that kind of trauma response in me, and that I was, like I said, like not sleeping, becoming very reactive, and that's not who I wanted to be. And, you know,
Go
over the course of, those kind of 10 years, I was like in learning about how to help him with trauma, getting him involved in every level of therapy I could possibly imagine. Like I thought I was doing all the right things, asking experts, reaching out for help, getting as much support and resources as I could. And it wasn't working, quite frankly. Like our relationship was getting harder and harder.
ahead.
And so then fast forward a couple of years, and I kind of stumbled into some mindset coaching, actually for my direct sales business. One of the ladies I work with said, you really have to check out this coach. She's just incredible. She'll really help you grow your business. So I was like, all right, sounds good, And pretty much instantly, as soon as I started to learn about how much control we all have over our thoughts and feelings, this light bulb went off, like, oh my gosh, this is what I needed when I adopted my son. Not, it wasn't that he needed more therapy. It wasn't that he needed more fixing. It was that I needed somebody to help me really keep my head in the game so that I could fully be present for him and fully support him as he was working through his trauma. Because the behaviors were wearing on me, right? Like I'm human, and what I was doing wasn't working at all. I really needed somebody to help me see how to really keep my head in the game and to take full control of my own feelings so that I could be present for him.
Wow. And you said at the age 5, you adopted him?
Yes.
And so at age 5, that's such a young age, what trauma can you share that he was going through, experiencing, and what was that kind of behavior that you were noticing?
Oh man. Well, he had experienced trauma even in the womb, from what his bio mom said, as far as prenatal exposure to drugs and alcohol, and then just the environment that he was living in for those first couple of years was very traumatic. Ambulances and overdoses and things like that. And so what that looked like in him, though, was an inability to connect with others, right? When he was just an infant, he learned rather quickly that he can't count on the adults in his life. And the wiring that happens in an infant's brain at such a tiny age, even starting in the womb, the way that the brain is wired to be in survival mode when an infant can't rely on the adults to take care of them, it's just wild how quickly those changes happen in the brain when there isn't that loving, nurturing, bonding attachment with a caregiver. And so, we suspect that didn't really happen despite her best efforts. I mean, I know that she loves her son very much, but she wasn't in a mental state to show up for him and love him and be present for him. And so, he would share some stories, some pretty deep stories that aren't mine to share, but, he would share some pretty deep stories in session that he recalls from when he was just little. And so he experienced this trauma, and different people in and out of his life. And then what we saw in our home was just wild behaviors, very much like, lots of kids test the limits. That's just an expected child thing. But when a child has not built an attachment, children are supposed to build at least one strong attachment in their first couple of years of life. And if they don't do that, then attachment throughout life can be really, really difficult. And so what we would see in our home is that he would get close to us, and then it was just so wild, some of the things that would happen, but do these things to just shove us away, basically. And sometimes it was really shoving, but, other times it was things um, more psychologically that would happen because he was wired to be in survival mode. And so that's what we would see, is that he would respond as if he was under attack, even in our very loving home.
Wow.
Food related issues and aggressive behaviors and verbal behaviors, and kind of like two different personalities. Oftentimes people would say, like, I don't see what the problem is. He's such a sweet boy. And I'm like, I know he's such a sweet boy sometimes, but the behaviors were very much all around building an attachment. So I was, trying to do the things, but I wasn't showing up and like fully being the mom that he needed. I thought
Wow.
I was, but now I know that that wasn't the case, now that I know about mindset.
Right. So what was the deciding factor, or what happened that made you make the choice of, okay, so this isn't working. Let me go a different route so I can better understand or better get to know what's going on, because he's so little. And I'm sure, kids get adopted at older ages as well,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
what made you decide, like what happened that you made the choice of, I'm going to, he's has therapy, but I'm going to help myself?
Yeah. So along the path, I had tried to get into therapy for myself. People were saying, like, clearly this is hard. It's really hard what was happening in our home every day. And, so the only recommendation was, aside from getting him in all of the therapies, was, well, why don't you get a therapist for yourself? And I tried it, and it was not for me. I think that there's so much value in therapy, but it wasn't for me. It wasn't
Mhm.
helping me
Right.
move forward. And I think partly because for me, like, I wanted to know, okay, this is what's happening today. How do I move forward? How do I create the future that we want? But therapy was trying to focus on the past, but whatever, like, the past is the past.
Mhm.
And I can't change his past. I can't change my past. I really just wanted to know what steps to take to move forward. So I had tried that route. And then as my son has become a teenager, he actually is with his dad primarily now, because things became so unsafe, just unhealthy in my home. Just that it's really common for children who have experienced challenging attachment. It's really common for them to kind of take out their frustration on the mom. And so this is what I was told all through the therapy is, right, like, of course he's going to take it out on you. You're the mom. And I'm like, well, that's great, but that doesn't help.
Mhm.
So he's been living with his dad, my ex-husband, primarily for the past, it's been about almost 2 years now. So we haven't been able to work on a relationship, but in that time, that's when I found coaching. And so I've really been able to work on me and my mindset.
Mhm.
And so two things. One, I know that I'm in a better place now, where when the time is right and we can work on a relationship, I know that I am in such a better place where I can show up for him the way that I wanted to back
Mhm.
then. And I also know that these experiences happen to me because I know, if you're listening to this podcast, I know that so many of you are hurting too. And I have the tools to help you to not feel like you're stuck, not feel like you're a victim, not feel like um, feel like you don't have any hope. So I know that I've had these experiences so that I can help others to get out of the hamster wheel, because it doesn't have to be that way. But I know when I was in the thick of it, I didn't see any hope. I didn't see any other options. I didn't see that that I was the one that I needed to work on. I really, all of the experts were saying, get him in therapy, get him into this resource, get him into all of these things. And, that was part of it, right? Like there were things that he had to work through, but my problem was with me and how I was able to show up. And I wasn't able to, because I myself at that point had been just so, I don't know, damaged, hurt, lost.
Right. And then that also shows as parents, even though we have kids and they can go through their own therapy, but it's also our self-responsibility to see where we can help alleviate and release some of our own, personal thoughts, opinions, and feelings on things, right? Because as parents, we want to control. And a lot of it, when they're smaller, and especially if they had trauma, it's becomes uncontrollable. So instead of, the idea of having that family and whatever was in your head or people's head can be a different outcome.
Yeah.
So do you think that if you had not had this experience and chosen to adopt, do you think you would not have gone down this route for you, that now you help people, you help moms?
Yeah, I don't think that, I think that I've had the experiences that I've had because I was supposed to, like I know that I'm here to help parents. And I could not possibly show up and really truly know how to help on a really permanent level. I wouldn't really know how to help if I hadn't experienced what I experienced.
Right. And that's an amazing thing to be able to have someone, right, that could have similar experiences and don't have the know-how or know who to assist for help. So can you talk to us about how does a child's trauma impact the parent, since we were speaking about your personal experience with the 5-year-old?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I think oftentimes that my experience and what I had heard from other parents is that, help your child through their trauma. But what I feel like isn't really talked about, or what I hadn't heard about, was how when our children are hurting, how that really, that energy, that experience, how that really just has this ripple effect on the whole family. And we weren't there when he was experiencing what he was experiencing. And since he joined our family, I could feel his pain and feel feel how hurt he was. But I wasn't there. I didn't experience that. But what I did experience as a parent is that because he was hurting, because he wasn't able to access fully the therapy, with all these different levels of therapy, and trying to offer help, and it really wasn't making an impact, it really wasn't changing things, then his hurt, his experiences ended up trickling out into the family and at school and into other relationships where when a child hasn't worked through their own trauma, or hasn't come to some kind of step moving forward, then it's what I experienced, and what I've learned is that then it's almost as if I feel hurt, so I must hurt others. I must, not feel that pain for myself. Let me put that off on others. And that's not, I didn't expect that. I didn't expect, and I'm not saying that in a blaming way by any way, right? He's just a child. But that's human nature to not want to feel the pain, and to to try to like push it off on others. And so that's something that I wasn't really prepared for. And I think
Right.
that in reflecting back, I think that's what ended up being the hardest part for me to deal with, and to then, like I said, to show up for him when I then was starting to hurt as well. And,
Mhm.
I could feel my energy being drained. My heart was hurting too, hurting for him, hurting for how I thought I was going to show up and just love him. And it was so hard.
Right. And what are three key things parents can do to change the trajectory of their child's life? What would you suggest there?
Well, so I have, yeah, three things that I think I have found to be really powerful in helping parents move forward. The first is being mindset. And first learning about mindset and really understanding it. Like, it's not that cutesy stuff that's out there on Instagram. Mindset really is your deeply rooted habitual thoughts and feelings about all kinds of things. And so, like, you think about your mindset around raising children, right? Like, we expect that when we have a child, however they come into our life, we just expect that they're going to love us and that it's going to be all, daisies and roses, right? um, and so when what we're experiencing doesn't match what our habitual thoughts, our deeply rooted thoughts are about children, that can create a lot of friction, tension, and disconnect.
Mm-hmm.
And so really, really learning and understanding mindset first, but then also knowing how to change yours, knowing that you have full control over what you're thinking and feeling, even though it doesn't feel like it most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So
But
that
there's
to me
that
is,
possibility, right, to have that
yes.
control.
Yeah. And, thinking about the mission of your podcast here, Wendy, right? Like, we do have full control over our future, over our thoughts and our feelings,
Mm-hmm.
despite whatever has happened in our past.
Right.
And I don't know if we necessarily, I think just the average human doesn't really know that. We're all really victim all the time to whatever circumstance pops up. So the first tip I have is to really learn about and then learn how to change your mindset.
Okay.
The second one is connection. So learning key tools to really connect with your child, even in the most challenging circumstances. And, like for me, and maybe if you're listening, you've had the same experience, but for me, because I had certain expectations about how a child should love
Mm-hmm.
and should accept love,
Mm-hmm.
it was really hard to connect. And I was trying, I was doing all of the things, but it it wasn't enough. And so really learning how to build a connection with your child, even when it's not easy, is key. But the other piece to connection is learning how to connect with your own intuition,
Mm-hmm.
because that's another thing that I experienced is that, and man, it just gets worse and worse every day, but there is so much information coming into all of us through social media, through our friends and well-meaning family members about, everybody has an opinion about how you should be raising your kids, how you should be showing up, how you should discipline, how you should praise them, what kinds of, how you should spoil them, whatever it might be, right? Everybody has an opinion. But really, when we get quiet and really connect with our own intuition, we really do know what's best for our kids. But
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes we don't listen to that, and we feel pressured to appease others. But your intuition knows exactly what your kids need. But oftentimes we don't do that because we're worried about what other people are going to think.
Mm-hmm.
But when I look back to when my son was younger, there were so many things that I knew he needed, but I was allowing outside influence to influence the decisions that I was making for him, instead of really listening to my intuition.
Mm-hmm.
So So mindset is my first tip. Connecting with your child and your own intuition is my second one. And then coaching is my last tip, because when you're dealing with trauma, whether your own or your child's, or even, I also support parents who are raising emotionally intense children, right? So for whatever reason,
Mm-hmm.
some kids just have difficulties regulating their emotions and can have lots of, meltdowns, and can be really challenging to parents. And so, learning, connecting with a coach who can really support you through and help you see, kind of like see the end of your own nose, right? Because it's really hard for us to see, what, how we're behaving or what we're doing. So having somebody else to show that to you, but then also learning tools to self-coach, because even when you do hire a coach, you don't have them with you all the time. You have to know how to coach yourself in the moments. When your child is screaming at you and telling you how much they hate you and telling you that you're not their mom, or whatever, whatever you're experiencing, you have to know how to control your own thinking and feelings in those moments, which really requires you to have some really great self-coaching tools. So yeah, for me, those are my three tips: mindset, connection, and coaching.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. So you said something about that I just wanted to touch up and talk to the moms is intuition, the intuitiveness of mom. And you said something about, how we're all like in that, we can be in that victim, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
when we're in that victim space, um, we can block out our own intuition.
oh yeah,
So when we're working on mindset and with the coach, we can then connect stronger within ourselves, because now we're making space for those productive thoughts to come in. And that's my experience with my clients, that's what happens. And then that's where the true connection starts coming in. So I just love gathering with guests that also do similar work, a little different because mine is more narcissism, that I help moms get through all that stuff. But it's still the same thing. It's that whatever experience we have, we can set ourselves off through victimship. And
yeah,
then, we can survive, but we really ultimately want moms to thrive, because that is where we're reached from one spectrum to the other spectrum. But it's
yeah,
in the in between that we need to be able to see ourselves, right? And that's that
yeah,
responsibility that we have to ourselves, just to be even a better version of who we were yesterday.
yeah, absolutely. And that intuition piece is so interesting to me. I mean, we've all had it, right? Like where you're in the middle of doing something and this little thought pops up,
Mhm.
and part of you is like, oh my gosh, yes, that is what I need to do. And then all of these other kind of voices are like, no, 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 you can't do it because of this. You can't do it because of that. You know, so maybe like a good example might be, so my son would be just in the middle of just a really rough day, and saying whatever he can say to push me as far as away as he could,
Mhm.
saying, you're not my mom and you don't love me, and I just, why don't you just take me back? Oh my gosh, I heard that so many times. Why don't you just take me back, right? um and dad loves me more than you do, and just like all of these things, right? And I would get these little blips of like, oh my gosh, Angie, just give him a hug. And then all of these voices would be like, no, he needs to understand his behaviors aren't right. You need to like keep your cool. You're going to be reinforcing these behaviors if you give him a hug. Like all of these thoughts would like override my intuition, which was just telling me to just go give him a hug and tell him you love him. But in the thick of it, when I was triggered, when my adrenaline was rushing, when all these things were going through my head, I would have these little blips of intuition that were telling me exactly what my son needed, and I didn't listen.
That's amazing, because it's the trigger of, and it could be just any person. It doesn't have to be this particular, in your case, like your child, but it could be a sibling. It could be, anybody that creates that fight, flight, or freeze. That's where our mind is like, well, what do I do?
Yeah.
Right. When that coming from the heart space could start shifting something more profound than what the logical mind or what we've been taught, how things should be so rigid and so stern, like they need to learn a certain way, right?
Yeah.
And so when someone comes to you or to me, that rigid, being a rigid coach is not helping a person.
Nope.
Right. So we should think about how would that be rigid, coaching with a child that really doesn't work well. It just kind of creates fire with fire.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened, right? Like I was reacting to the behaviors as much as I would take pride in the fact that I was keeping my cool, right? Like I very rarely would raise my voice or like get to his level
Yes.
of anger and yelling. It was so rare that I
Yeah.
would escalate as well, at least on the outside, but on the inside, I was definitely escalated, right? Like my adrenaline was rushing, and yes, very much like you said. I was in that fight or flight mode inside. I was keeping my cool on the outside for him, I thought, but he is so intuitive himself. And
Mhm.
so that's so common in people who have experienced trauma, is to have that to be hyper vigilant, to
Mhm.
really be more aware of the people in their surroundings than maybe the average bear might be.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so I thought, like, I am like being a cool, calm, collected mom. I'm doing all the right things. I'm responding to behaviors the way that I have been taught to, and all these trainings I had gone to, right? Like I was responding the way that they told me to.
Yes.
But I now know
Mm.
that I wasn't listening to my intuition, and
Yeah.
that he was so much more
Mhm.
perceptive of what was really going on inside of me than probably I was.
So amazing. You said you had gone to so many trainings and how you should be, how you should, but then one of the things lacking, and I feel that you are like you feel, right? And so from the training to what you felt, there was a disconnect as well,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And so
Yeah.
we learned that we go to trainings to become better, but I feel it's so important to include your intuitive feelings. Like, what do you really feel? Like, I know I've been told this, but what do I really feel that I can dissipate, regardless of what I've been taught with my child?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? That's
Yeah.
amazing.
It's so powerful.
Right. So before we close, Angie, is there something that you can leave that maybe a mom can apply in her life with her child?
Yeah. If I were to leave you with one thing that you could start working on today, it would be to not ignore those intuitive hits that are popping up. So if you are dealing with challenging behaviors and you get this little blip of like, this inner voice is telling you to respond in a way that maybe doesn't jive with the way you've been doing things, take a second and listen to what that thought is,
Mm-hmm.
and really ask yourself, is this like, is the way that I'm proceeding in my child's best interest,
Mm-hmm.
or am I doing what I think other people think I should be doing? Because your intuition is not going to tell you what other people think you should be doing. Your
Mm-hmm.
intuition doesn't care.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
Yes, that is
you know,
true.
stop squishing those intuitive hits and really really take the time to listen and ask yourself, what does my child need?
Absolutely. That's beautiful. I'm so glad that you came on here, and I'm going to put your links and all your social media information where they can find you. And I know, like you said something about what was your free gift that you said it was like is it like a 30-minute meet and greet you, or what
Yeah,
was
so for any of your listeners, I am offering a free session. And so in my free session, like I know your time's valuable. And if you're a parent, I know that you have so many things on your to-do list.
Mhm.
So my free session is not just a meet and greet. It's in that session, I go through a really powerful exercise where I walk you through some really key areas of your life and help you really start to create a target area to really start working on, so that you can leave that free session with tools already to start making some really permanent change in your life. So it's so powerful, totally worth your time. And then in that free session, we can decide if it's a good fit for us to work together too. And that's totally up to you. But parents leave that session feeling really empowered with something to start working on right away. So, and I do have limited spots. I work a full-time job. So yeah,
Okay.
if that sounds like something that you'd like to connect with, I would love to. I'd love to offer that out to your listeners.
Beautiful. All right. So thank you so much. We appreciate you. We appreciate your presence, and wish you all the best, and hope we still stay connected for some more episodes in your evolvement and in your own growth as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for your time, Wendy. This was so lovely.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to Neutralize the Mama Trauma podcast. If you haven't already, please hit the like and subscribe button so you don't miss any new episodes. It would also mean the world to me if you're able to take a moment and rate and review my podcast on how it was helpful to you. Also, please connect with me on my social media platforms. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you in the next episode.